Okay. Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. I have the honor of introducing Dr. Susan James. She has just been so kind throughout this experience with me and has offered up her time and her resources and her knowledge to share with us. She is about to have her 35th anniversary of teaching, so she is super skilled and has lots of knowledge to share with us. I have been working on this for the semester with Counsel Academy, and I am just super excited to have an open conversation with everyone and hear what Dr. James has to share. So thank you so much for attending, and let's go ahead and get in.
Thank you, Ashley. I appreciate that warm welcome. First off, I just want to tell you a little bit about my background. If anybody is familiar with the National Writing Project, I direct a large project in the Panhandle of Florida. There are approximately 200 sites that we have, and we have, fluctuated between 150 and 200. And this is a research-based institution that is a collaboration with K-12 schools and all professors across the nation that have a site. But I'm also a professor at the University of West Florida, where I teach literacy, English courses in the graduate and undergraduate program. I think where I decided to go into academia was when I taught high school, where I was known as the book dealer. I had a lot of students that would come out to my room and they would ask for book recommendations. And it was a very good time in my career because a lot of those students became readers and are still reading today. The one thing I think I need to share is that I have been researching this young lady, Elena, for now 19 years. She's my daughter. I adopted her from Russia. She is part Asian, part Russian, and I've been able to take what I have learned and apply it and try to shape her into a reader, writer, thinker, communicator. And she's my true love and true joy. I'm including my email address. I want you to feel very comfortable emailing me with questions. If I don't have answers, as Ashley knows, I will get an answer for you. So I look forward to hearing from you if you do have questions. Okay, so I want us to first talk about online learning. Not easy. For some, it comes very easily and they prefer it. They have that natural ability to organize and to get through courses. But there are some kids that do struggle. And I want us to talk about the platform that I'm using today. It is called Padlet, and it is an organizational platform. Students can use it. They can click on the plus sign, and as you can see here, there are ways that you can connect handouts, links, anything that you need to connect. You can also make short videos with it. So teachers, you can have students actually respond to content that you post. And I mean, the opportunities there and ideas are just amazing. It's interesting. I've just found out that Padlet has started working with teacher educators, and they reached out to me to ask me how I utilize it with K-12. And you're going to see some of the ways that I do that. I want to start with talking about reading and writing. I mean, I think that parents need to know. We always say, read to your student, read to your young people, read to your young people, read to your young people. But I think one thing we also need to consider is write with them, talk with them, think about vocabulary, and, ask a lot of questions of them. Talking in the car and ask when your young person uses a vocabulary word, throw out there, hey, what's another word for that? Can you think of another word for that? I mean, just the smallest of conversations that you have with your kids can really encourage them to be lover of words. And, I'm going to share with you, in fact, at the end, an example of my friend having a conversation with his daughter yesterday, because it's exactly what I'm talking about here. In education, I use mentor text, and what that means is reading and writing go together. You can't have writing without really investigating reading and analyzing reading and applying what you learn from the authors that are writing. Those things go together, and I'm going to kind of showcase for you how that happens. So, for instance, you have a book. This is a middle school book by Jason Reynolds called Ain't Burned All the Bright. This is a book that was written during COVID. It is a story about a 13-year-old boy who's experiencing COVID, and it's from his perspective. The book is organized using art, and then you've got an artist that is drawing the pictures. You've got the author who is creating the words. It's a beautiful collaboration. But in there, you could see how the author uses what I call a decalogue. He makes a list of things that are occurring during COVID that were difficult for him and for all of us. And so I may have my students write in the day and create a decalogue of what did this student learn from the book, 10 things that the student learned during this time period, and then have kids create their own list or their own decalogue of 10. And this is a very powerful way to get kids to, it's what I call low stakes writing. They're making a list. You're not having them do anything other than make a list. And then you can utilize that list in so many ways. You can teach them how to sort their ideas and organize their ideas. You can teach them that that list could actually be 10 different types of writing. The opportunities here just go on and on. So think about that. One thing I want to impress upon teachers and parents here is always share your own decalogue. Here's an activity that one of my teacher friends used to do, and I loved it. When you start teaching at the beginning of the year, asking the parent, asking the guardians, what are 10 things that you want me to know about your young person? And, seeing that parents write too, teachers write too. I think modeling is one of the strongest tools you can use with your youth. So I wanted you to see how that works with combining reading and writing. Here's a nonfiction picture book, and I used to use picture books when I was a second grade teacher. I used them with my middle school students, and I used them with my high school students. And the high school students enjoyed them the most. Picture books are a microcosm of society. Excellent way to teach theme when students struggle with theme. You're using it as a scaffold to get from that type of text to more complex text. And this is a beautiful picture book about the author here. Look at how he's a doctor. This author is a doctor, or this character is a doctor, but he's a doctor that also writes and discovers the world around him. And he is William Carlos Williams, and you probably remember The Red Wheelbarrow poem. And that book talks about how he created that poem. So this would be an excellent book to scaffold poetry instruction, and then have students write their own So Much Depends Upon poem. 16 syllables are used. Have them create their own. And, think about this as a scaffold. Ashley, you and I have talked about how, at times you like to have a model for writing and look at models for writing. If you're studying math, you can have students write a So Much Depends Upon using 16 syllables to summarize steps to a problem. You can do the same with a science experiment. You can do the same with a piece of art. And it's a scaffold that really motivates students to then take that writing and turn it into something more traditional. So these types of strategies we found are very motivating. They provide a very wide group of students with scaffolding. Lots of fun. I challenge all of you to write your own So Much Depends Upon poem based upon something you read and, respond in writing. So as I said, reading and writing are our framework. And, we have found that reading is like breathing in and the writing is the breathing out. And we want our youth to breathe in those ideas, to want to read, to want to talk about and articulate all ideas and, use the academic language that they are learning within the books that we are reading together. But we also want them to look at the craft of authors. And I'm not just talking about fiction books or poetry. I'm talking about the craft of the mathematician, the craft of the social scientist, the craft of reading a poem or the craft of reading a piece of art. We have to see that things are all, they work together. So I want to share a couple of things with you, and we're not going to get too deep into them, but they're there for you to read at a later date. The guru of writing in the United States is a man named Steve Graham. He started off at Vanderbilt. He's now at Arizona State University, and we have become pen pals. Yesterday, one of my doc students won the Dissertation of the Year award at our university, and it is because she used his model of writing community and conducted research on that. And he talks about how if we don't integrate reading and writing, it's a disconnect for kids. And he gives some really good examples of why this is important. We know that the brain, if we take an MRI and scan the brain while students are reading, we find out a lot. I mean, we can find out if there are disabilities. We can find out what parts of the brain are working, and we can plan intervention for any gaps that they have. But the problem is that's almost a $10,000, endeavor to do that MRI. But here's what we know about reading. Within the first 10 minutes, the brain is starting to visually see things, maybe smell if the text includes smelling, even holding a book and having that old book smell in their hands. We know that they start to make connections. But what amazes me is when they get into the 30 minutes, they are able to transport to a different time or place. And so you start to see kids actually interact at this point and start to get the sticky notes out and start to highlight and annotate. At 60 minutes, they're totally immersed in this. You start to see uncontrollable laughter. You might see some real sorrow. The real world starts to recede. After 60 minutes, the book becomes all consuming and, very distracting in some ways. I'll never forget one of my students at Florida State said to me, Dr. Suze, I'm getting a little frustrated because now when I read, I'm sitting there and I'm kind of distracted by my thoughts. And, I just started to laugh because that's what needs to happen. Reading is a cognitive activity, and, students need to understand that brain needs to be working. This is a really good, just what happens in 1 hour. And I think our challenge is and I see this with online learning a lot, is that students are not spending as much time with interacting, and teaching kids how to interact with text can be very difficult in an online environment. So I want to give you some ideas today of how to do that. Okay, Ashley, am I back to the Padlet? Okay. I get nervous because I can't see whether or not I'm back to the Padlet. So, parents, how can you at home help these kids really get into thinking deeply about text? I worked with two researchers when I was working on my master's degree, a professor at James Madison University named Gay Ivey, and a professor at UWF named Kathleen Hubach. And I was their graduate assistant. And we started thinking about how can we simplify strategies that are used when reading. And so we divided those into 3 questions. And we teach these to students because they need to know reading is cognitive. We need to have active, you need to hear that voice in your head. And I actually have had students say, I don't have a voice in my head. Well, that's something that can be modeled and taught, even at a high school level, even at a college level. So we think about, how does what I already know help me to comprehend while I'm reading? So before a student even starts to read, they need to look at what's being read and think, brainstorm. What do I know about quilt making? I use that example because that was a standardized test question. There was an article about quilt making, and the males in my classroom were not very happy about that. But, stop for a minute, make some predictions, and, even think about, well, if there is an article about quilt making, we know this is going to be informational. And what do I know about quilts? Not a whole heck of a lot. What questions do I have? Okay, what inferences can I make? Look, what's the purpose? And look for hints within the text structure. So, when students get frustrated at home, take them through this process. It can be very helpful. And then as they're reading, tell them, okay, what do I do if I get stuck? Well, never lose sight of that purpose. Purpose is important. If you don't stay focused on what the purpose is, you are going to get lost. Ask questions. I'm trained in this, and I've been doing this forever, as Ashley told you. So when I read a book, I'm constantly thinking. I hear the voice. I sit there with a pad of Post-its. Ask Ashley. Ashley will tell you. And I'm constantly writing out questions that I have about what I'm reading. Right now, I'm reading a great book it's called 3 Summers. It's a young adult book. It's about Bosnia, the war in Bosnia, and what happened during that time period. And, I don't know a whole lot about that. So I'm learning as I'm going along, and I'm thinking about, the purpose of it, and the questions I have about it, and why is this happening? And when I get stuck, I need to know, what are things that I can do to help. If you go to Washington, D.C., and you see Thomas Jefferson's library, you will be enthralled by this because he is constantly writing in the book that he's reading. He did that. He would write about the purpose of what he was reading. He would ask questions in the margins. If he didn't understand something, he would stop and look it up and define it. He would make connections to what he was reading. This reminds me of. He would imagine by drawing pictures of what he was reading about. And he really honestly knew what it meant to engage with the text. And it's fascinating. You can go into the Library of Congress and see his books open, and you can see that he's using these strategies. The third question I always ask kids is, what's the author want us to know about what we're reading? And, really you're going to either summarize if you're looking at fiction, or you're going to get to the main idea. And we need to explicitly teach students how to do this. So with getting to the main idea, ask them, what's being said here? And what's being said about this idea? Why? Asking the 5 W's, who, what, when, where, why, and then how. And then in summarizing, a strategy that I use is somebody wanted, but so. Who or what is the reading about? What is the motivation? What do they want? What's the conflict? What's the but? And how is it resolved? Which is the so. And using just that little strategy will allow students to read sections of a text and summarize into a bigger summary. You can use this for history. Something happened and then science, something happened and then it's just a way to provide support. So I have a little note about, asking them questions. And the thing is if you couch it in a conversation, they look at it a little bit differently. They don't think that you're pushing the homework. They become your partners in thinking. And that's when the magic really happens. So, that's something you can use to have basic discussions.
I have something to piggyback on this, Dr. Seuss. I just want to say that in my own experience of being an online learner and being completely homeschooled up until I went to college, I have firsthand experience when it comes to reading a text and actually struggling myself with understanding the theme, understanding the plot, understanding what was happening. But what was really beneficial for me and my learning was my parents actually doing the reading with me. And I remember my mom, we would either listen to an audiobook or read it, and she would actually stop and ask me, what do you think is going to happen? Like, do you think he's going to make it out? Do you think they're going to make it out? And I would be getting more invested because my parents were expressing their interest and asking me what I was thinking about the story, just kind of getting me out of the story and thinking about like my own, what do I think is going to happen? And
Right. Your mom was definitely showing you that she valued learning and she valued what you had to say about it. And you're very blessed to have had that. I think parents sometimes don't know what the research-based strategies are. That's why I provided this for you, because you can keep it and know that these are the types of things that I want to be talking about, having them make predictions and, getting to a prediction and then sitting there and thinking, oh, my prediction was wrong. This is what happened instead. Even by stopping and talking about why a prediction is wrong allows for students to see a big picture. I have worked with so many high school kids that I'm sure they were taught these strategies, but they come to me and I ask them, what strategies do you use for reading? And I get the same answer. Strategies, I just read. And it's way more than just reading. It's interacting with the text. So, okay, so we know reading and writing need to go hand in hand. And I have learned that when you start a student with, okay, we're going to be pre-writing, okay, we're going to write a draft, okay, we're going to revise and edit the draft, okay, we're going to look at the conventions of this, you get the deep sigh. So I'm going to give you a little framework for working with students, and it's called the 6 traits of writing. And the way you can remember this is that your idea is central to everything. That's your framework, that's your foundation. And that's what's the most important, is the idea. And once students become very happy with the idea they have, then you work with them to see, okay, could we look at your word choice? How did you organize this? Could you organize this a different way? What if you put this here? What would happen? How would it change the piece? Looking at sentence fluency, how does it flow? Having them read it out loud to you to see if it flows in a way that goes with what the student is trying to get across. Is there voice in it? Does the personality come out? So I've given you here something to keep to talk about, writing with the students. And I hate to say this, but I think by providing as many activities as you can to inspire ideas, low stakes activities, the more writing you'll have. We as educators think we have to grade everything. That's not the case. You can have the students writing, writing, writing. You need to build the writing fluency, and then going back and having them select pieces that they really want to work on. So I wanted you to have that, and I wanted you to think about this because this is something that I think we don't really think about too often. But when you look at reading and you look at a book and you figure out the main idea or you figure out the summary in reading, that's the same as students writing their ideas. When you read and you look at text structure, like we did with All That Burns Is Not Bright, with the book I talked about at the beginning, you look at the text structure, students can actually replicate or use that as a method for writing. And then you can look at a piece of text and see how voices developed or word choices developed. And really, the last thing you really want to look at is conventions. And by this point, students are invested. When they have an idea that they like, they've been able to develop it, they're way more capable of, going back and working on the conventions of it. I've seen that time and time again. And it's such a wonderful thing to see. So I've given you those frameworks. I want to talk about textbooks. I think all of you will have textbooks in your students' lives, and teachers have textbooks too. But I want us to talk about the features of textbooks and the teaching of English and how things have changed. We were talking about this before the session. There's such a fluidity in teaching. Things are changing at such a fast rate. And there are experts that are creating textbooks that know this, and they want to help teachers and parents. So, there's a lot of choice in these textbooks with what students read. I have provided this little Calvin and Hobbes comic, and Calvin really he says he doesn't like school, and the parent says, why not? And he goes, you read every dinosaur book that there is. And he said, well, we don't read about dinosaurs. So the relevance of allowing students to, look at a topic that you're teaching and maybe branch out and find something that they're really interested in within that topic. But I want to show you in textbooks, there are a lot of resources that you can use at home to help you. Now they come with video libraries, and, they have current events tied in, and there are discussion boards. And what I love the most is there are leveled text, because you've got students that read at different reading levels. And we're talking, my high school class back in 2007, I had one kid that couldn't read anything, 10th grader. Then I had a whole group of kids that were reading around the 3rd or 4th grade level. Then I had the majority of my high school kids were reading at a 5th grade level. And then I had some that were reading at a college level. So how do you teach a class like that? Well, the new textbooks really provide a lot of support with this and provide various readings. I see, Ashley, your mom's astounded by that, but it's true. It's very true. And that can be very difficult. There are even, there's a new app that's ListenWise. I don't know if it's going to open quickly, but this is an article about the pandemic and how kids were affected. There are a lot of different stories in ListenWide, and I want to, really emphasize to you that it's okay for kids to be using their readers that are audio, because the research shows that when we use that MRI machine, and here's some research that's conducted by my friend, how
I think
benefit.
you stopped sharing your screen.
See, I get very nervous about that because it does happen sometimes when you're flipping from document to document. Let me get it up here. Okay, Ashley, we back up there. Ashley.
Yes, all better. Sorry, I couldn't get my mute button to undo.
But this research by Rose Brock talks about how audiobooks, if you use that MRI machine, you will see that the spaces in the brain that light up are the same as if you're reading. And so, don't feel that that's a crutch. If that's what students need, I recommend, and Rose doesn't really agree with me, but I recommend that if they're doing an audiobook, if they have the book in front of them, I think that, helps a little bit more in terms of training the eye. You got to remember there are muscles on the sides of the eye, training the eye to read and increasing the fluency. But I wanted to provide that for you to see the research that's been conducted. And one thing that's really good is these textbooks, start with an essential question, and they provide a lot of different mentor text and different activities, and they combine that reading, writing, listening, speaking, and a reflection. And I think reflection is, very important. So let's get into some tools so that we don't run out of time here. And if there's something, on the Padlet that you're interested in that I don't cover, please reach out because I'll be glad to answer questions. The first thing I want to talk about is teachers and actually planning for instruction. And, teachers look at, what do I want my students to be able to do? And it's the same with parents. What's the teacher asking for my child to do? And you've got to think about, is the student capable of doing that on his or her own? Or do I need to provide support to get him or her there? And it completely makes sense. Anything we do in life, if we don't have those skills, it's like playing soccer. If I don't have the skill to be able to dribble the ball down the field, then how am I going to be able to play the game? It's the same with math. You start with basic math. If I can't do these things, how am I expected to go into higher math? In English, if I don't know a simple sentence and a compound sentence, how am I going to be able to vary the way I write? So, we need to know with every lesson we have, you may have to be creative and see that adaptability there. You may have to adapt the way things are being done and maybe go back to thinking about the core skills that are needed in order to do whatever we're asking those students to do. And then you've got the kids that are so far past that maybe we need to entice them in an inquiry-based type of learning where there are other topics that are out there worth exploring that maybe could be of interest to that student. So, I want you to think about, remember, it's called scaffolding instruction, and it's needed in so many ways. One of the ways I found that was most beneficial is through using a notebook. And, now that we've gone digital, there are a lot of notebooks out there that students can do digitally. But I want to mention to you that the research is supporting the fact that actually writing, the motion of writing, having a piece of paper and a pencil definitely helps with retention of information. So typing on a keyboard is not the same. We know enough about that now. And Ashley knows very well what a reflections notebook is. It's basically using one side to teach a skill and then having students respond, demonstrating the knowledge of what they've learned. And this is one for teacher ed. It's got a little different activities. You know how I talked about having students make predictions? Well, you can even provide some scaffolding in terms of an A to Z chart where they're writing down what they know about the civil rights movement that starts with, M. And coming up with a word wall that can be used for them to have academic language. And as the teacher has them reading more and more, they continue to add to that word wall. Drawing. Extremely visualizing is one of our strongest research-based strategies. Having those students, especially those that love art, using these types of visuals in their notebooks to learn things, teaching them tools of, graphics and having them apply this to what they're reading. There are a ton of different strategies in here. And I tell you don't know what they know until you hear them say it or see them write it. And so, this is a low stakes notebook for kids where, it's formative in nature, where they're forming their ideas. You don't have to sit there and grade every little piece to this notebook, but it gives them a platform for compiling and then demonstrating their knowledge. And it allows you to know what you need to provide in terms of that adaptable instruction. So something that came to me teaching Elena, and Ashley knows this story. Elena was taking a photography class and she had to learn like 50 terms for her photography yearbook class. And I kept quizzing her and kept quizzing her, and she just wasn't getting it. And it came to me that, oh my goodness, just quizzing her is not enough. She needs to have something to hang these vocabulary words on in order to get a full understanding. And so I asked her, when you're at the top of the bleachers and you got your camera and you're taking a picture down at the football team, what's that called? Bird's eye view. She started to spit out the terms very naturally. So everything we do, we need to give them what I call a hanger to hang that knowledge on and to be able to make sense of it. And even if it's like, an essential question, in English, we look at this, and this is intimidating for kids. Here's from a reading, a memoir. Communities are not built of friends or of groups with similar styles and taste, or even of people who like and understand each other. Very long sentence. It could actually prevent a student from moving on in the reading. Actually teach them how to take that paragraph and break it into pieces. Put it in a table, a graphic organizer. We know graphic organizers are research-based. Have them on the right-hand side of the table draw a picture, bullet, words, write, in their own words, what that sentence means. We have to explicitly show them how to slow things down, break things up, and get through a reading. And that's a strategy that works extremely well with all content areas. And allow them in their reflections notebook to use graphic organizers with vocabulary. If the word was adolescence, then what are some synonyms for adolescence? Or if the piece is about growing up, what happens in the text? Give me the evidence of things that happen in the text. So allowing them to use these kind of strategies and scaffolding methods really, really will help. Okay, I'm going to come back to considerations and modeling, because those are resources for parents to be able to get some expert opinion on some of the things you might have a challenge with online learning. So I do want to mention a few tools. And I know I don't want to talk much longer because I do want to take some questions, but there are tools for vocabulary, teaching vocabulary. There are tools for reading and writing. that I've compiled for you, tools for listening and speaking that I have put together for you. And then I have one last thought before we end, okay? And I'm actually going to start with listening and speaking. And see, that's what I love about Padlet, because I can take the whole column and I can move it down here. And students can do that as well. You can move all of these boxes, reorganized, great for reading and writing. And the reason why I wanted to move listening and speaking is because listening and speaking are the precursors to writing. We know what we know if we speak it or we write it. We are constantly modifying our understandings as we listen to others. So if Ashley and I are having a conversation, and we used to do this all the time in her class, and someone would bring in another piece of reading that they read and tell us about it, it reshapes how we think. And we need to teach kids that that's important, that the right answer is going to change as our society develops, as our ability to think develops. I mean, we know that, young people, their brains fire differently than ours because they have way more technology. If you put us side by side, mine looks very different than the younger generation. But I think what is true here is that we should learn from each other, and we need to find evidence and teach kids how to find evidence and think critically and then speak articulately about findings without arguing, which I think in our society is not easy to teach. So there are a couple of strategies here that I want you to think about. One is the 6 hats of thinking. And basically, this is taking a topic and assigning colors to each student to respond to something with only that emotion. And I always explain how this happens, like in courts. If we're looking at a court case and the lawyer only speaks in anger with the red hat, then that lawyer is not going to be very successful. If we in our relationships only wear the red hat, then our relationships are not going to be very successful. So it's kind of interesting to assign colors to students. And at the beginning of the year, I kind of assign them a color that goes with what they feel comfortable with. And as we work toward the end of the year, I start to challenge them in thinking a little bit differently. So, you can see that it's very interesting to watch this come to play. I provided, one of my good friends is an author, a middle school author. And one of my favorite books that she wrote is a book called Dear Students. But you can see several of her books, amazing books. And there's some great activities, journaling prompts where you can have, cut them on, put them on note cards and have kids talk about what they're reading. Good ideas. But she also on her site shows how you can use 6 hats of thinking.
Michelle's on it.
Why?
Okay.
Hi, Michaela.
Hi, sorry. Continue.
The 6 hats of thinking can work, in everything that they learn. And I've given you a link to, and this is for adults to use, how to look at things in a balanced way. And it's got a ton of ideas about topics and how to teach kids how to look at all sides. And that could be used in conjunction with the 6 hats of thinking. Lots of resources out there. If you're short of a resource, think of, emailing me and I can find things for you. So having them do things as simple as at the beginning of the year, looking at something like All I Ever Really Needed to Know, I learned in kindergarten, having them read it, having them decide on one classroom rule that's most important, and teaching them that when you share what you have learned, you must include evidence. And so have them make a claim about what's most important, have them dig for evidence as to why it's most important, and then teach them that they have to include a so what. So what does this mean for us as a society? And so everything that you do like that, have them, okay, what's your claim? Where's the evidence? And why is this important? I think if you think about that within listening and speaking and give them that scaffolding of how to do it, it becomes kind of second nature to them. I love these, I told you I use a lot of picture books. I Want a Iguana is a cute book for teaching persuasive writing. This kid wants to own an iguana, and in there gives very solid reasons why the iguana should come and live at their house, makes the claim, gives the evidence, gives the so what. And it's a real fun way to have kids write about, okay, so what do you want? What do you want at your house? And, how are you going to plan that argument, have a claim, and really give good evidence as to why? So there are a lot of good resources out there. I'm going to kind of move past this. Retelling is a great way. Let me just talk about this, and then I'll move on to the other columns. Retelling is important, and I wanted to give you, parents, a way to have kids talk about what they're learning, in math. So what are you learning in math? Well, when do you use this in the real world? And what concept or what procedure do you use to do it? Like, have them teach you, because they will retain so much of what they teach you. What are the steps for that? I bought Elena a little whiteboard and a marker, and she used one of her old socks as an eraser, and I would have her write out the steps to something in words and then in images. And, this was very good for her for math. It's her best subject. And I started to use it more for English class to get her, and then she was more apt to use it. But really, how do you talk to them about what they're doing? And this will, give you a great, great guide. Okay, some tools for vocabulary. Vocabulary is very easy to develop. Let kids talk using their own words, and then challenge them to go back and use stronger words, and again, use those hangers that I'm talking about. If you're teaching them vocabulary words, make sure you're attaching it to something. What are words we use to describe personalities, for instance, if we're studying about characterization? And, having them brainstorm, what are words that we use to describe personalities? And, what about this character? What word would you use to describe this character? There's nothing better than to see a group of middle school students arguing over what word is the best word to use to describe a character. But they're going to remember them if they have something that they can hang it on. So there's some really good ideas here. We do this with paint chips when we think about shades of meaning. What's the weakest word that we have? For respect, what would be the strongest word we have? And challenge kids to go back in their writing, find words and strengthen them, find the just right word. And then they don't see it as revision and editing in writing. They see it as, oh, great, I'm going to use a highlighter, I'm going to highlight some words, and I'm going to bring some strength to those words. Having them work in groups with this works really well. Okay, reading and writing. This is one thing students should always know. I'm writing a first draft and reminding myself that I'm simply shoveling sand into a box so that later I can build castles. The notebook, a great place to shovel information and then take the information and come up with those castles. Students are very resistant to writing because of the red pen that sometimes teachers use. And so we need to teach them to write as a community. We need to teach them how to help each other edit. I have a whole nother presentation about that, building writing community. But, just making them feel comfortable in sharing their ideas. And there's some really good ideas here as they read. This is called a 6-room poem. When they're reading fiction, having them jot down words about the plot, about the scenery, some of the sounds they hear, some of the things they're thinking about, wondering. So see that supports reading strategies. The feelings, anything that's repeated in this passage, because we need to teach them explicitly that repetition is probably going to give us a good idea of what the theme is here. And then taking that, and you can even take that reading, no matter what it is, science, social studies, and highlight some of the words to create a poem about what they read. I mean, there's just so much you can do with that. I'm including a 6 traits rubric for you. One of the things that parents can do is ask them, what's your writing process like? How do you get to ideas? How are you organizing this? I think one of the most impressive things that my students came up with was the fact that using a reporter's formula, just a simple graphic organizer, to write 5 questions about what is being read, and then talk to your neighbor and come up with the answers together, and then taking 3 of those ideas and asking more questions about what they're learning, and then working to find ideas. It's a really good way to organize. And then they don't realize this, but they just organized an essay or informational essay about what they're learning. So using all these kinds of supports can be very, very helpful. So look through these. There's a lot more. I know we're getting close on time, but this morning I always sit out in my chair and drink my coffee, and I catch up with what's going on with my friends. And I had one of my author friends wrote this on his Facebook page. Why is it important to protect the freedom to read, personal inquiry, and encouraging learning beyond reading levels? Because of conversations like the following that bubble up organically. Everly, my 9-year-old, has been asking to play catch with a baseball these last few days. So she starts to throw the ball, and I don't have these in the correct order. She says to her dad, "It's really stupid. Girls should be able to learn too." And as a parent, I probably would have said, let's find a better word for stupid. What synonyms do you know? And she tossed the ball high and he chased it. And he said to her, well, I couldn't agree more. Hey, where are you learning about women? Because she's mentioned, I like to learn about women that are making a difference in society. And she said, oh, I found some books in the library about them and they're interesting. And I keep reading about them. And she went on and she talked and I listened and we played catch and she dreamed of the future. And it's all those organic conversations that you have about what they're reading, what they're writing, what they're thinking that can really promote that kind of, involvement that you can have with your kids. You don't have to have a PhD in reading or writing. You just have to have a genuine love for discussion and teaching kids, how to do that. I'll get these in the correct order. I was just, I'm like, this is exactly what I'm talking about today, authentically having those conversations. Okay, Ashley, I'm going to turn it back to you.
Well, thank you so much. That was so wonderful. And honestly, I felt like I was even learning more things just by your presentation. So really, thank you so much. And I see this in my experience with online learning in Counsel Academy and with my student teaching experience. I've seen where the students, they want that interest and that connection, whether it be with the teacher or whether it be with a book, they want to see their interests also being validated by the other person or the text. So I think these are really great resources, and I'm so excited that they're going to be provided to all of us. And so, yes, so thank you so much again. I just really appreciate you and this opportunity with Counsel Academy to give this information to parents and people alike. So thank you.
Well, I'm very happy that you've got, a leader at your school that knows the power of, literacy and knows that online is not always easy, but also understands that there are a lot of resources that can be given out there. Like I said, I provided some things to think about considering and modeling. And, if you're having trouble with helping your young person break up assignments, if you're having issues with a young person being able to articulate what is being learned or how to take a chunk of text and break it down. I mean, there are a lot of different resources here for that. And, some of you may want to learn how people learn. This is a good resource here, a good book to read. And like I said, Common Sense Education has a lot of resources too. You're not out there alone as parents. There's a lot out there that can offer assistance, and, just reach out if you need anything else.
Yes. Thank you so much. Are there any questions for the participants who are in here? No? Oh, yes.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you very much for this time. I have 3 close friends that are writing books right now and asking me to proof and give feedback. So printing out the checklists and helping with word definitions and new strategies to think and absorb what I'm reading. I really appreciate this very much right now. And
Kimberly Willis Holt is one of my favorite authors. She's from this area and she's a redhead. So we bonded when I went to LSU as a teacher there for a summer. But she teaches kids that you're going to read something and just look at the word choice. You're going to read something and just look at the spelling of it and look and make sure that you're using homophones and correctly. Is that the correct there? She has backwards. And when she comes to one of those words, like from the very end of the piece to the very beginning, and when you come to a word like to, you stop and then you read that sentence to make sure you have the right to. So yeah, I mean, I really think we just need to model that this is the way it's done. And, you take pride in it and you have to do a little at a time. And I think a lot of times we as teachers want them to write on demand, and it doesn't work that way. So thank you. I appreciate that comment.
absolutely. And I am curious about the 6 hats and this app that you referred to. Will you explain a little bit more about that?
Yeah, the 6 hats is when you're reading something and you want kids to talk about it. Like right now, I'm just going to throw out the book I'm reading is about Bosnia. Okay. And if we were looking at this book, we would have kids that would have red hats that when they're reading, they're only going to respond in a way that's not real positive. And we're going to have the kids that are wearing yellow hats, that everything they say has to be positive. We're going to have the kids with the green hats that are going to, instead of answering with a red hat or a yellow, they have to come up with solutions. We did
I
this.
like it.
We did this one time in class with when you remember when the NFL started kneeling during the pledge. Now, these were college students, so the topics are going to be different than they would be for elementary, middle, or high school. But, there are always, learning is all about having issues and trying to solve them. But it was amazing for them to see what they came up with by the end of the class period in the way that they were thinking. And, at the end, they said, you really need to look at all sides to an issue. You just can't approach it from your heart. You've got to approach it from many different perspectives. You've got to find evidence. you've got to find facts. You've got to have somebody that's optimistic about it and somebody that does actually ask questions and plays the devil's advocate, for lack of a better phrase. Just, how we need to realize that in us, we need to have all those sides. When to our thinking, we need to, remember take a step back and think about things from the facts and work together as a group to come up with creative solutions. And
I love it.
I know you had another question. What was the other question?
You referred to an app or something that you had referred to, like an app to make it easier to, or where all of these sources are located.
Well, this
A website.
modeling, these are, this is what I love about Padlet. You can go in there and you can actually connect to Scholastic.
And it's
So-
called Padlet.
Padlet.
I'm going to share this. We're going to get this recording on YouTube, and then the Padlet link will be in the description. So you'll have access to this Padlet in the resources.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate that.
Any other questions?
I don't have a question, but I just wanted to say I'm really proud of Ashley and all the hard work she's put into this. I know she's been really dedicated to it, and so I'm just super proud of her.
You know what I loved about it?
Hmm.
I became the student and she became the teacher, and
Yeah.
made her very aware of deadlines and like we get together and it's
Yeah.
it's a whole different world and
Yep.
her now, but I'm so proud of her
She's
too. And
fantastic.
I'm proud of you. I mean, listening to what your sister had to say about what you're doing at UWF and
Mhm.
hearing, students that are not, their English is not their first language.
Right.
And then, knowing that the lesson plans that you're doing in my class support that. I mean,
Yeah.
I couldn't be any luckier than I am to have you guys.
Thank you. I mean so
Well,
much.
I would not be here without you, Dr. Suze, and that is 100% like the
Aw.
truth. So I am so appreciative of you and your time and energy into this event and just into my education in general. So, we wouldn't be here. I know Michaela and I can confidently say we would not be here without you. So
I know you're going to carry the torch and do what's right for kids and know that, things are changing on the daily and you just have to keep looking for answers and see it as a fun challenge, don't see it as stress, see it as a fun challenge. Let's figure this out. And when kids see you do that, that's just modeling in such a great way. So your students are lucky there at Counsel Academy. If you guys have any other questions, please reach out.
yes, absolutely. Thank you so much. And we will get this posted as soon as possible.
Okay, have a great day.
Thank you.
I would like to add something. First of all, I loved the golden nuggets Dr. James shared with us. This was such an amazing event. I was actually taking notes. I still have some. My camera was off. I didn't want to show others that I'm writing and not looking, but they're amazing. My daughter is in middle school. I mean, she's not an A student in English. She gets B's. So I would definitely, and she's going to high school. She's a rising freshman. So I would like to have some of your tips in brief. I mean, these are all wonderful. I took pictures, some screenshots, some notes. I'm going to follow that. But in a nutshell, if you could share some tips, how she could improve herself to an A.
Absolutely. I would start her with the journal, tell her we're not going to grade this. You're going to have fun with this. You can use it the way you want. And I would start her with talking about what we have found about reading. And, when it gets to be too much, kids tend to stop.
Mm-hmm.
You teach her, what do I know about this before I start reading? And, the strategies with that. And I'm going to tell you, you may want to get somebody like Ashley to work with her instead of you doing it, because I bet you already know about the push and the pull of the mother and the daughter. Because if Ashley works with her and shows her how this works, first off, she'd gain a great mentor, but also, you know, they can take a short book and practice these strategies. A lot of times kids are not explicitly taught these strategies and they need to have them. And so as they go on, you know, if they're having problems with making inferences, then you practice a little bit of that. And that's easy. You know, you take a book like Tough Times, that's about the 1980s recession. And you don't look at the words, you look at the pictures and you have her make inferences. And then you go back and read the text and you see how those two connect. I mean, I can give Ashley some good ideas about how to do these things. And then, you know, just moving it to more difficult text. It is shocking how far behind some of these students are.
Yeah.
And just because she's behind now does not mean she will remain that way. And I'm going to tell you, think about this, people that come to the country that speak no English and how they learn, it can happen. So, you know, keep that in the back of your mind. So I'll be glad anytime she's having difficulties with something, you just shoot me an email and I hope you find an answer.
Thank you
Okay.
so much.
You're welcome. You guys have a great day.
Yes, you too. Thank you, everybody, for participating. I really appreciate it.
I love spending this time with my prior students. It's fun.
Thank you, guys. Have a good day.
You too.